Well, it was a real crap game that we saw on Sunday. Here the boys are here. Curtis Crabtree, Fox 13. Tim Booth, for the first time, we can say Tim Booth is here with the Seattle Times. Although he covered the game, the Seahawks loss, as his last assignment as an Associated Press writer. But he's joining us on Monday as the new reporter for the Seattle Times. And what are we covering? Are we just we're a Seattle Times reporter, or are we just covering all of it?
For right now, it's probably going to be kind of similar to what I was already doing, maybe just a little bit less, but some hockey, we got an NBA exhibition game here this Friday, so that's going to draw a fair amount of attention being around that. And then I think I probably will be back out at Lumen Field Thursday night for the Seahawks game. So not, at least to start off with, not much different than what I was already doing.
Good. Way to make that transition to a new role that was going to be less stressful. Jesus. All right, so we had to change the name of the show because I got a couple of people alerting me, hey, there's another Seahawks show out there, and this is not specifically a Seahawks show. We're doing like an old school radio show. We just have a segment talking Seahawks. But the guy was like, hey, you're stealing this guy's bit, the Hawks Nest, and I'm like, I didn't do that intentionally. I had no idea. So my apologies out there. I just was thinking of a title of the show and thought, well, where were my first season tickets? Like when I had, right when the stadium opened up. Well, it was Hawks Nest. And I love the Hawks Nest. It was a great place to watch a game. It was wonderful. And I still believe it's like the best seats in that whole stadium. So that's why I went with the name. But then someone said, oh, well, you should probably well, no one said you should change it. I just thought, well, if there's something else out there, I don't want to cause any friction. So me and some buddies put our heads together, and I just think we came up with a great one. I mean, it really, really is. And it's so good, Tim Booth, because you'll appreciate this. Curtis is too young to really appreciate it. It's so good that I had to even find an open for it.
Prepare well, your team is probably going to play well. You're not always going to win, but they're going to play hard, and they're going to go out there and
they are, Chuck.
Performance. You can live with that.
Today we're going to talk about our next opponent.
Best head coach in Seahawks history, Curtis Crabtree. So it's the Ground Puck podcast with Tim Booth and Curtis Crabtree, because legendary Chuck Knox, Ground Chuck, that's Ground all Chuck. They would do, would run the football. Something Ryan Grubb could have done today, Tim. Run the football. It's okay to run the football. These two are brought to you by Georgetown Brewery, locally owned and operated by two diehard Huskies, Manny and Roger. They've been pouring the best local craft beer for the past 23 years. Manny's Pale Ale. They got Lucille. They got Rogers, Bodhisattva. They just got everything. There at Georgetown Brewery. Tap room is open every day, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., 7 days a week. GeorgetownBeer.com. Tim, let's start there. What the hell happened? Well, what was that? And especially for someone who had the Seahawks -7, not a good day.
No, it wasn't. It really wasn't if you had them -7. I understand the worries about the balance on offense and the fact that it was so pass heavy and that the run game never tried to even get established in the first half or even really the second half. Like, Ken Walker needs to have more than 5 running plays in a game for you to be successful offensively. But what the hell was going on with the defense? And for them to get gashed the way they were especially in the run, New York was the 32nd ranked team in the league in average yards per carry coming into today. And they ran for 175 yards on the ground. They averaged 5.1 yards per carry. They were averaging 3.4 coming into the game. Like the way that game got controlled by what the Giants did on offense dictated what happened. And I think that led to Seattle being so pass heavy. But this one, as much as you can easily criticize the way the game was called and the way some of the offense functioned today, to me, this one's squarely on the defense and their inability to get stops, to get the Giants in tough down and distance positions, and to allow a really mediocre offense to do what it did to that defense today.
Yeah, Curtis. I mean, your thoughts. I mean, what you watched. That was just one of the most horrendous defensive performances I've seen in a Seahawks team for quite some time. I mean, there's been some bad ones, but that ranks right up there.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you don't have Devin Singletary or Malik Nabers even in the lineup for them, I mean, Darius Slayton's the most high-profile name that was on the field in that game. That's not a game you're expecting to get torn up by the opposing offense. I mean, Giants fans are wanting to, are questioning Daniel Jones staying the starter and all of that, and he comes in here and plays perfectly fine against your defense. The Detroit game, I think you can at least reason away. They're down 6 guys on defense, and Detroit's offense is pretty good. You can understand how a game like that happens. This one's tougher to get to, and I mean, even with the 102-yard fumble return touchdown, I mean, they went straight down the field, 16 plays, 79 yards on that drive. Like, if you want to take like a bigger picture of what that game looked like, I mean, they probably should have lost by more today, to be perfectly honest. And their defensive inability to do much of anything. They lost the line of scrimmage on both sides of the football, and particularly with the defense, it was just not a strong effort by any stretch.
I mean, Curtis, just to follow, that's a 36-13 game.
Yeah, I mean,
that's what that is.
It's easily a double-digit loss, realistically, how you want to look at it. So maybe you could say the blocked field goal kind of evens things out at the end in some ways, but they were thoroughly outplayed by a mediocre New York Giants team.
Tim, how does that, you touched on it a little bit there, and it bears worth going back to, especially of how he looked in the second half against Detroit coming out, after being away for a couple of games. I still can't wrap my head around Ken Walker getting 5 carries, 2 in the first half. And it just seemed there was a stretch. It was I don't know if it was the first series of the third quarter, second series of the third quarter. I mean, he didn't even touch. I think he touched the ball 1 time. I mean, I'm just curious why they got away from it. They never established it. I'm baffled by that decision by Ryan Grubb.
Well, I think it stems a little bit. We talked about last week about the struggles of this offensive line and how having Ken Walker in the lineup is so important because he's the back that can, make the first guy miss and make something out of a play that's not there. The strength of the Giants is their defensive front. They have a pretty good defensive line, whether it's Dexter Lawrence or Kayvon Thibodeau or whoever they have up there. Their defensive front is probably the strength of their entire team. So I understand the idea of you need to go out and maybe throw the ball early to get them to back off a little bit, and then you can turn to the run and try and work it that way. They just didn't do anything offensively in those first couple of drives to start to do that, and then you kind of got in that situation a little bit last week, where similar to last week, where I think, and Ryan Grubb got into this a little bit at Washington at times, where it's just so easy to get up on the line and call a pass play. It's the nature of where football is right now. It's easy to go no huddle. It's easier to make your call at the line of scrimmage based on what you're seeing from that the defense is showing and just call a pass play. And so often now, pass plays are serving as extended versions of runs. It's just the way it is through the different kinds of wide receiver screens or the backs out of the backfield. It's just the nature of where offensive football is these days. But to your point, you got to establish some semblance of traditional run. It's got to be there if you're going to have balance and success in your offense. And they just never got to that point today. And then you look up and you're like, oh crap, Ken Walker has 5 carries. That just can't happen.
Right.
The nature. I think the nature of the game, kind of the flow of it and the way it played out, is sort of what dictated that. But it would not surprise me if we look up Thursday night when they play San Francisco and Ken Walker has 10 carries in the first half. It feels like it's become that noticeable and that much attention has been put on it, where there's going to be a drastic change here moving forward.
I mean, Curtis, I mean, there's going to be a lot of discussion about Grubb's play calling, the decision to throw it as much as they were throwing it. Again, he threw it 40 times today in a game that was, you take away the blocked field goal, they got a chance to tie it up. They're going to go into overtime and maybe have a shot to win it. And then you look at with the combo of Ken Walker and Charbonnet, 7 carries between your two backs. That's not balance, and that's not what you're not going to win too many games doing that. I mean, I get how the offensive philosophy has changed. I want to switch gears to the defense, but do you have more on the offense?
Yeah, I just want to. I mean, they didn't throw it 40 times; they threw it 51 times.
Oh, 51.
Realistically, because they had 7 sacks and 4 scrambles off of Geno runs. They dropped back on 51 of 58 snaps in the game to throw the ball, which is just a staggering amount. And, maybe a galaxy brain thought on what they were doing here is because of the Thursday night game coming up. Do they want to limit the pounding that the running backs were going to take, knowing that the 49ers game was around the corner, trying to manage things a little bit looking ahead? Is that possibly part of the equation? It's possible, but I mean, as Tim mentioned, like the Giants' defensive fronts, the strength of their team, the run defense, and it's like they tried to deal with the run defense by not dealing with the run defense and just not running at it. And so, whether it would have changed the circumstances of the game, I don't think any of us can even speak to that necessarily. But just how heavily skewed the run-pass ratio was really strange.
Yeah, but I think that to me, and Tim, you touched on in the beginning, but Curtis, I mean, the storyline is you talk about an offense that was bad. It was a bad offense going into the game. It was a bad offense with Singletary and Malik Nabers. It was not a good offense. And then you take those two guys out, and I don't know, maybe it's just human nature. Maybe these guys saw that and said, Malik Nabers, best player. He's not even going to play. Hey, Devin Singletary is not going to play. We're going to coast, man. We're going to blow these guys out. And maybe they let the guard down. But, I mean, that offense did whatever they wanted against Mike McDonald. And this is you hired this guy specifically for one reason and one reason only, to fix the defense. And now we got back-to-back games where, and again, you can go back and blame the injuries on Monday, but they were pushed around in that game. And Detroit did whatever they wanted in that game. New York comes into town, Curtis, who have really no offensive weapons, and they did whatever they wanted against his defense.
Well, like I mentioned earlier, you could explain David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs having, some solid games against you. To see Tyrone Tracy go for $120, I don't think I knew who Tyrone Tracy was before kickoff of this game.
Never heard of him. Where $5? Where'd he go to school?
I don't know. I thought he was drafted in the 5th round. That's all I know. So,
Tim, it's a popular drink.
It's a popular drink.
I mean, I don't know. I like it.
Okay.
He's a Boilermaker.
I know.
Oh yeah. Well,
I said Purdue.
I said Purdue,
and Curtis decided to talk over me. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, Curtis, you're right. I never heard of this guy. Now I'm scrambling to get him on my fantasy team.
Well, they aren't playing the Seahawks going forward, so that might not work as well.
He looked amazing, though.
He did perfectly fine. I mean, there was plenty of room for him to run most of the day, too. I mean, even before the lost fumble on the first drive, basically benched the other dude that they had in there, Eric Gray. Like, they had the back-to-back screen plays that they went to that were gashed wide open on the wings, too. So it's not like, it's not like they had much struggle finding ways to move the football down the field on the Seahawks defense.
No, and I thought this was going to be they still can't defend a screen. I don't know why. Still can't figure that one out, Tim.
It's written into the bylaws of the Seattle Seahawks charter as a franchise that they're unable to defend a screen pass. But I think it's 3 times in 5 games you've been gashed by the run.
Oh yeah, like New England. I didn't even mention them.
New England ran for I think 180. Yeah. The Giants today running for 175. Detroit could have run for a lot more last week and just decided not to run David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs much in the second half of that game. Like you have some run defense issues right now, and I don't. It's hard to know where the issue is. Is it problems on the interior defensive line? Is it your linebackers aren't in great position? Like but you're getting gashed. Like these aren't just 3 yards in a cloud of dust constantly. These are 8, 10, 12-yard runs that are happening, and that's again, to your point, Puck, you brought in Mike McDonald to fix the defense, and right now what's popping up is the same issues that you've had for the last several years of getting gashed in the run game. And is Byron Murphy's absence that significant? Like it is significant that not to have that talented guy on your defensive line right now, but is it so much that you're getting just run over in the way that you are right now? Is Boye Mafe that good at setting the edge that no one else can step in and replicate that to the point that you can actually stop the run? Like these are very significant issues that are showing up that, again, I think question how good your depth is outside of your frontline starters, especially on the defensive side.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's a huge red flag. I mean, it's a red flag in the beginning of the season because, to your point, this was the biggest issue that they needed to solve from their defense was to how do they stop? I mean, one, how do they improve overall as a defense? Number two is, especially that running game. And to your point, Tim, I don't know. Curtis, I'll ask you. I don't know what is the biggest issue. Is it the defensive line or the linebackers? My gut tells me this. Just watching the games, uneducated, sometimes falling asleep a little bit, is they are not dynamic at the linebacker position. That's just how it feels to me. But, I mean, maybe it's something will come out, some stat or an analytics will say, no, you're way off. It's the defensive line. That's just how it feels to me. I don't feel those guys make any plays or is many is that they should now because the defensive line isn't doing their job. How do you see it, Curtis?
I do think there was some times today where the linebackers didn't get off the second level blocks to get to the run as well as you would like to see. I think, I mean, it's cliche as hell. It's both. Like when the holes in the line of scrimmage is as wide open as it is, it's tougher to get a guy down. And if the guy's going full speed by the time he's hitting the line through an open hole, guess what? It's going to be tougher to tackle that guy too if you aren't able to square him up in the hole. All of these things kind of play factors. But as you mentioned, like the questions going into the season were what? Line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, right? And that's what we've seen through 5 weeks on the offensive line still. And particularly in the 3 games where the running games really jumped up and did them against New England, Detroit, and now today against the Giants, where that still appears to be an issue with the running game. We saw it coming out of the New England game. Miami was too bad to try to do anything against them in that particular contest. But it's basically been like a month straight now where the running game is getting through just fine on the Seattle defense, and it's something they have to get cleaned up, particularly with the 49ers coming in, who tend to like to run the football themselves quite a bit, even if they don't have Christian McCaffrey.
Well, that's right. It doesn't matter, right? I mean, I think the Giants just proved it against them. Well, it doesn't matter, right, Tim, that they don't have Christian McCaffrey, Mason. I mean,
Jordan Mason's a good enough back.
Yeah, I can do it exactly what Tyrone Tracy out of Purdue was able to do. I mean,
well, and it felt like today that the Giants really took advantage of having the extra days off and being able to watch. They played the previous Thursday and being able to watch Seattle on Monday night. It felt like they had time to really scheme up a running plan or a running system to take advantage of what Seattle had. And maybe that just hasn't been the case up to to this point, to this degree, that you could have a guy like Tyrone Tracy come in and run for 130 yards. But it felt like the Giants' scheme, whether it was the screen passes early, the way they actually called their passing game and didn't really put Daniel Jones in too terrible situations, the way it felt like they were running a lot of off tackle, and they were kind of running to the edge but not running to the outside to where you would have like Witherspoon or the safeties coming down, but more kind of attacking that sort of defensive end outside linebacker edge, and finding success there. It just felt like a very well schemed up game that the Giants had, which I think was a benefit for them of having the extra days off and then catching Seattle on a short week and being able to watch that Monday night game and pull things from what the Lions were able to do and put that together.
And right now, Curtis, they're in. You start looking ahead to some of these games. I mean, you are in a real position here early in the season, and God, I thought the first month went swimmingly. I mean, I did a whole thing on Friday about how that first month of the season, you've passed the first month as a new coach and Mike McDonald with flying colors. He's 3-1. There's some issues, but you have to be satisfied after the first month of the season where he is headed, where this team is headed. God, now after this game, you start looking ahead and go, Thursday night you got San Francisco, who's coming off a loss to Arizona. They're going to be pissed off. I mean, both teams are going to be pissed off on Thursday because they know that you don't want to slip back anymore. You got to get things right. So San Francisco's going to come in all guns a-blazing, wanting to win that game. And then you got to go at Atlanta, which again, high-powered offense. That's going to present a ton of problems for Seattle. Then they come back home to take on Buffalo. I mean, man, God. And then you get the Rams. So again, I know the Rams are the Rams. They're all beat up, but it's still a divisional opponent. But these next 3 games, boy's going to go a long way, Curtis, of maybe how this season goes.
Yeah, and this is why it was so important for them to get ahead of the sticks in the first month of the season against the teams that they were facing, because this stretch was going to be coming. And we talked about before the year about the fact that this coaching staff is all completely new in their roles at the NFL level. You know, first-time head coach, first-time NFL offensive coordinator, first-time NFL defensive coordinator. There was going to be some growing pains along the way somewhere. Welcome to them, because they're in them right now. You know, whether you want to point to the fourth down decision that they made to go for it in their own end there early in the fourth quarter, trying to get back into things as well. And that play blowing up, you know, courtesy of Brian Burns pretty spectacularly and leading to a short field goal that seemed like it might be the difference in the game there for a while. When all was said and done, to the running game split today for the offensive side, to the running game stuff defensively the last 2 weeks for the defensive side, there's some growing pains that they're going through right now for sure. And as you mentioned, you could flip the script entirely if you win Thursday night and get back up, you know, above water against your divisional rival in the 49ers, and all of a sudden you can kind of move past this one a little bit quicker. But yeah, those games coming up against a frisky Atlanta team, Buffalo team that still can do plenty, all of those things are going to be more challenging for sure.
Tim, what did you think? Was it the first time that maybe that Ryan Grubb was outmatched?
I don't know if he was outmatched. I just think I think he just got out of sorts with what needed to be the focus. Like I don't necessarily think it was an outmatched thing, because I don't think the way the Giants, I didn't see anything from the Giants defensive scheme that was like, oh my God, they're doing something completely different and they've never seen this before. It just felt like it was a poorly called and executed game early on. You didn't have the ball enough. You weren't able to establish anything on those first couple of drives. Here's the Giants going 9 minutes down the field. You get the fumble return for a touchdown, and then your defense is right back on the field. So your offense is sitting there forever, not getting a chance to get out there and create any sort of rhythm offensively. That takes you out of your rhythm as a play caller, trying to find what the flow of the actual game is. So I don't necessarily think he got out schemed or out coached in this way. I just feel like the offense and Grubb in particular never found a rhythm to get into the game. And that, I think, was part of what led to the lack of running attempts with Ken Walker and with Zach Charbonnet, was just you didn't have the traditional cadence of how a game goes, because you punt, they keep the ball for 10 minutes, you get a fumble return, and your defense is right back out on the field, and Gino's sitting over there twiddling his thumbs going, well, when the hell do I get to actually play in this game again?
Yeah.
So I feel like that was more what happened versus the Giants throwing some sort of crazy scheme at them that really caused the problems today.
Curtis, why does it appear, and it has been the case, that DK just has a ball security issue?
I think he gets into some vulnerable positions from time to time, whether it is those straining for extra yards. All of a sudden now he's falling while guys are rallying to the ball, and the ball can get out away from your body just that little bit, or circumstances happen to where that becomes an issue. Today's one I thought was kind of a pretty normal fumble. You're going to get some of those from time to time. I didn't think it was anything too egregious, but it's just, when you look at the entirety of his career and the number of fumbles that he's had in circumstances like that, it's not ideal. But there were so many other problems in this game. Certainly that fumble hurt, because they were driving. First drive of the third quarter, had a chance to get points on the board for sure. You don't want to see it, but it wasn't something that was like, oh my God, you can't have that. Those are plays that I think happen throughout the course of an NFL season. But it's something he still needs to try to be aware of for sure, because it does happen to him a little bit more often than you'd like to see.
Hey, Tim, give me a clarification on the blocked field goal. I thought that was, regardless, I thought that was illegal, jumping over a player.
As long as you don't touch the player, it's legal for you to actually leap. As long as there's two factors to it. One is you can't touch the lineman. The second piece of it is you cannot have a running start. So the fact that Isaiah Simmons was able to just take one step and leap over the lineman, one, freak athlete, like, oh my God, that's a freak athletic play. But two, and the other piece of it too, which we found out from the NFL actually made the play legal, is Dexter Lawrence on the one side, and I can't remember who the defensive lineman was on the other side.
Raheem Nunez Roches, yeah.
Thank you.
Sounds
like an exterminator company. Dexter Lawrence kind of shoves down Laken Tomlinson on his back, and that allows Simmons a little bit more space to clear and get over the line. That's all legal. As long as you're not hitting the player in the head, as long as it's his back, that's a legal move that a defensive lineman can make. So that was something that the Giants special teams coach went to Brian Daboll, the head coach, on Tuesday and said, hey, we think we can actually do this. And in a critical situation where we need to have a block. They saw something on film that whether it was Tomlinson lowering his head or just the alignment being low or whatever it might be, they saw an opportunity there and went to their most freak athlete guy that they had who was not on kick block until this week.
Right. This is his first week, right?
Yes. And said, go out there and do your thing. And he saved the game for them with an incredible athletic play.
What about the contact to the long snapper for Seattle? Can you make contact?
Same thing. You can't do it to the head and neck, but the pushing on the back is perfectly fine after the snap.
They're protected in college, and you can't line up. You can't line up head on with the snapper. You have to be offset from them, and they're protected in college. College, you can't touch them. In the pros, as long as you're not lined up head on to them, you can make contact with the snapper.
It was a hell of a play. I mean,
phenomenal play.
One of the best plays I've ever seen.
It was so reminiscent of the Cam Chancellor.
Yep.
A block that he had back in the day, and similar sized guy, a guy who probably should be. Isaiah Simmons has been kind of that tweener guy throughout his career about whether he's a linebacker or a safety. Similar build, similar size to Cam, and here he is leaping over offensive linemen and blocking kicks in critical moments.
You think, Tim? You think Geno thought he had the first down when he went into his slide?
I think I think so. That's the only reason why he would do that in that situation. I'm guessing he kind of glanced over and thought he was at the marker and slid. It's not Geno's nature to slide before you get to the sticks. I think he just misplaced where he was on the field at that moment.
Curtis, they I'll tell you what, we've been clamoring for it. Well, many people have been clamoring for it. God, you got to get that rotation at guard, right? It's got to be Haynes and Bradford. Christian Haynes can't play. He can't pass block. He cannot do it. He gets pushed back more than I've ever seen a guard get pushed back. Every time they try to attempt to pass, I mean, the defensive lineman just shoves him 5 yards back. I don't know what they're going to do.
Well, I'll let you in on a little secret. Usually coaches don't play the worst guy. They tend to want to try to win the games. And in general, they put the guy out there they think does the better job.
Yeah, but they put him. That's what I'm saying. But they can't even do a rotation with this guy. He cannot play.
So that's why Anthony Bradford was the starter the first 3 weeks. And he's been the starter every week. But that's why they haven't played Christian Haynes over him. It goes back to the same thing like Hasselbeck, Whitehurst back in the day. They play the better player. That doesn't mean Anthony Bradford doesn't have his own issues too, because he does.
Did have good hair though, Curtis.
That was the only thing he had. And so guard position remained the problem for him. Center position certainly would have been a problem for him too if they hadn't added Connor Williams. They'd be that much more worse off. think about it. Going back to training camp, the two centers they had, one's playing in Cleveland and the other's been inactive for 3 of your 5 games in Oluwatimi. So that was going to be your starting backup. Nick Harris and Oluwatimi were going to be your center position up until about the second week of training camp.
Hey, Tim, on his headstone, when John Schneider passes, it's going to say, architect of a Super Bowl team, also could never draft or develop an offensive lineman.
Or pay for an offensive lineman.
Or pay for one.
Yeah.
Who's the last guy? Who's the last guy they paid? What's the left tackle?
Russell Okung.
Okung, right? But no, I'm really paid. Was Russell Okung the last one they really paid?
Pretty much.
Probably.
Like the last like legitimate guy that they paid. Yeah, it's probably Russell Okung.
Charles Cross will be. Cross is going to be.
Yeah,
Cross is a dude.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. I think they'll have to re-up Charles Cross because that guy can play. Everything else just feels like a crapshoot on the offensive line right now. I mean, it really does. Just like even like Connor Williams didn't play great today. He had the false start penalty. He didn't look that great. But yeah, I mean, everything else. Stone Forsythe's been pretty good for the couple of weeks he's been filling in, and he had a couple of procedure penalties today. And now in 2 weeks, you're going to roll Jason Peters out there at 42 years old and have him jump. Like it's just one stopgap after another of trying to come up with solutions for this, this constant leak that never gets fully fixed in terms of having a functional offensive line.
Well, they're 3.5 point dogs at home. Again, the early line, San Francisco favored by 3.5 against Seattle on Thursday. I mean, a few days. I mean, how you give them a chance against these guys? Or San Francisco's going to watch the tape, boys, and see what New England did on the ground, what Detroit did on the ground, and clearly what the Giants did on the ground. I mean, how do they pull off the win on Thursday?
They reestablish the run game themselves. Find a way to take advantage of, San Francisco's defense isn't quite what it's been. You saw the Cardinals had really good. Now you have a really mobile quarterback in Kyler Murray who was sort of running all over the place, making plays. But the Cardinals were able to have some success with James Conner on the ground today. I think you have to find a way to establish the run game yourselves and just get back into a traditional rhythm with what you're calling offensively. And defensively, you have to stop Jordan Mason. You have to make life uncomfortable for Brock Purdy. And even when you make life uncomfortable for Brock Purdy, one of his big strengths is not getting flustered in the pocket and being able to keep plays alive and find those really talented guys downfield. There were, as the game was going on with the Cardinals, you'd see highlights flash up every so often, and here's Brock Purdy like extending the play a little bit, and then finding Brandon Ayuk for 25 yards downfield or whatever it might be. The weapons that the Niners have are really scary in terms of that offense, but it all starts, I think, with stopping Jordan Mason, stopping that run game early, and then just making things just uncomfortable for Purdy. You do that enough. I think he's, as much as he's shown some steadiness, I think there's the opportunity to cause him to make some mistakes along the way.
All right, Curtis, you get the last word. What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, it's a game that can win. I mean, the 49ers have lost to both Arizona and the Rams so far, early in the season here. So they're plenty beat up, and there's holes in their game too. But they have to play cleaner football than they've played the last 2 weeks, particularly on the defensive side, because where the 49ers are good can press on some of the areas where Seattle isn't. If they're going to show their weaknesses as heavily as they have the last 2 weeks here, particularly that run game. If they get that going, it's going to be a tough day for them.
There they are. It's the Ground Chuck podcast. Did I say Chuck? I meant Puck.
Yes.
The Ground Puck podcast.
You screwed up the name of your own podcast.
I did. I already did. I knew I was going to do that. Well, we are honoring the greatest head coach in Seattle Seahawks history, Chuck Knox. Don't even come at me with Pete Carroll. Just let me have Chuck Knox. The 12-year-old wants Chuck Knox. All right. The hat, the jacket, everything. Hey, is Dave Craig going to play today? No, he's injured. What's wrong with him? He's got a knee. Anything else? No, he's just got a knee.
Correct me. They're in those uniforms this Thursday night too, aren't they?
They are.
They are. Did you see the Broncos, by the way?
Yeah,
it looked
good.
beautiful.
Oh, just beautiful.
Beautiful. They should have rolled them out on week 1
and
had them do. It would have been
the
greatest uniform game ever.
Oh, the Broncos. I mean, as much as I hate that team, they're just so pretty. They're so pretty. All right, there it is. The Ground Puck podcast. Curtis Crabtree, Fox 13, Tim Booth, Seattle Times. Yes, he's over at the Seattle Times right now. Are you going to change your Twitter handle? No.
It's going to stay the same.
Okay.
It's just buy Tim Booth. No reason to change it.
I don't know if you're going to go Tim Booth Times or something like that. I don't know.
No.
Something fancy.
No, I'm good. I'm happy with where it is.
They join me every Monday talking Seahawks, brought to you by Georgetown Brewery. Go get yourself a beer at Georgetown Brewery. It's good for you. It's good for the soul. Doctors say 1 to 7 beers a day is good for you. Go to georgetownbeer.com. Go visit the brewery if you haven't done it. It's open 7 days a week, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Go open to close. If you go open to close, they'll throw in a hat and a coaster for you if you do open and close. In case you missed this, you want to go back and watch it, it'll be up on YouTube. You can also listen to it, Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. And, of course, up at pucksports.com. All right, boys, we'll talk to you next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.